Hi, welcome back to Learn Payload with Colin. This is my first 100 video series. We're on lesson number 16, and we're continuing our series on user authentication. This is part 3. We did a couple other parts where we just introduced user authentication, created our own login page, and we added some middleware to guard against protect certain routes and redirect them to the login page, or vice versa. If they're already logged in, we redirect them out of the login page. We haven't done user registration yet, but we can do that in a future video. Right now I'm focused on getting a user logged in, and today logged in without a password using a password login link. So the idea is that a user will enter their email address, and we will send them an email with a link that they can click on, which includes a temporary sort of token, and we'll use that token to authenticate them, and then set the proper cookies so that Payload knows that they're a valid user. So we're going to dive right into it, but first let me do a quick demo, and then we'll go into the code. All right, thanks. Okay, what we have here is our new login page at /login. I went over that in a previous video, but I removed the password, and I actually have GitHub login working now too. But I will talk about that in a future video. And it's sort of the reason why we're using passwordless login, because there's some functionality that we had to kind of create in order to accept a user as the one that we want to be authenticated, and so we're going to use that function to help us with the GitHub login as well. But we'll go over that in a future video coming up after this one. So what I did was I removed the password field, and I just pre-populated this input so that I don't have to keep entering stuff. And we also set up an account on mailtrap.io. And it's a fake inbox, basically. You're probably familiar with those types of things. However you set up a fake inbox, or maybe you want to set up your own, you set up a proper SMTP server or an API with resend. There's all kinds of services that will help you with that. But for development, I like to use a fake inbox, and I use mailtrap.io. If you prefer another service for development, for like a fake inbox, let me know. I'm always eager to find out more, try different things. So, all right, so I have this sign-in form, and you just click this button, and I have a success message. And now if I head over onto head over to Mailtrap, you can see I have this email, the login link. I even have styled emails, which is pretty cool. I can go over that too. I'm not sure I'll go over it in full detail on how I set up the email adapter, set up the email templates, but I promise I will have another video, another lesson on how I set all of this up. But to try to keep this video as tight as I possibly can, I had to, I'm not going to go through all the details on how I set all of this up. So, okay, so now I have this email, and now all I have to do is click login. And now it redirects me back to the admin page, logged in. And so you can see here, it's all, I'm a valid user. I am logged in as john@example.com. And you can also see, if you inspect the cookie, it's all there. So I'm going to log out one more time, and you'll notice that when I log out, normally when you log out of the admin panel, it will redirect you to the admin/login. And so if I were to go to admin like that, or even admin login, it's always going to redirect me to just /login. You see that? And there's probably a million ways to handle this. I chose what I think is kind of a hack, honestly. And so I want to just step through that really quick because I think um, it's important because it was so easy to do. I was like, why don't I just do this? Leave it like that. So all I did was I just created a route in my front end. Under auth, admin, login, page, and then I just created a page that redirects to /login. Like I said, it's super easy to do. It works great. I don't have to worry about configuring the payload config file with like components and before logins and setting the routes. And honestly, I couldn't figure out how to get that to work. I've seen in the community some documentation on how people have done that, and honestly, it seemed very complicated. It wasn't working right. And so yeah, I just did this simple hack and it works fine. So let me know if there's an easier way or a proper way to do this, because I wasn't able to find it. And so yeah, that's what I chose. I just chose to do that. And so yeah, here we are. We log in. And for me, the way I set this up, you don't have to do it this way, but I can actually put in any email address here. I can say hello at payload.com. And this, even though this is a brand new an email address that did not exist in the database, I set this up so that it creates the user anyway. And I'm thinking, well, why not? Why not just create the user? Why does the user already have to exist? Just create the user that way too. And so you can see here. So now I'm logged in as this hello at payload.com. And I have a default name in there as guest. So so what I'll do in a future video is have a profile page for their account so that a user can go in and make changes. And of course, we're going to do things like add roles and permissions so that, I mean, the average user, there's going to be a difference between an admin user and just a regular like member of the site. And they don't need to be messing around in the admin panel. We'll just have some specific pages that are going to be available to them. But that's it. And then, so yeah, let's dive into the code now. So we're going to go over to the login page, which we have under front end, auth, and then login page. And so this is just a regular page with a login form component. This is a server component, server side page, and then the login component is a client component. And I also have Tailwind 4 in here, as well as shadcn. Again, I don't have time to go over how I got all that set up, but I will have a video following up, maybe as a bonus video. I don't know what you want to call it, but I will go through and discuss exactly how I got all of that working, if that's what you would like. So I'll have that in another video. So here's my input. You can see I have my default value just for convenience. Make sure you add a name. I make this mistake every single time. When in shadcn, if you copy and paste some code and stuff, it usually doesn't include a name. And so when you're using server actions and things like that when you're using the form data component object. I always forget to put the name in there, and every single time. And so yeah, if you're working with form objects like traditional web form objects, make sure you put your name in there. Okay, so I'm using use action state, which is part of React, and if you're not familiar with it, it allows you to wrap your server action in a state sort of handler so that you get a pending state as well as a response, or what they call state. I personally called it response because I think that's what it is. It could be anything, whatever you return from your server action is what gets here. It could be an error, it could be success, whatever you want it to be is what is returned from your action. And so logically I called it response. And so I have this, I'm using Zod. Also, again, I'll go through this in another video if you would like, but there's some boilerplate here that I'm doing that I don't want to get into in this video. I just want to show you exactly how passwordless login works, like from a functional point of view. And so here's my server action, async. Make sure it's async. You get when you wrap your server action in that use action state hook. You have to change your arguments here, your parameters, to include the previous state, and then your form data goes here. I return a promise with this as the type, login link state, or what I call response. I'm gonna return either a success or an error with the email address, or the email as the error. So I use Zod to parse the email coming from the form data, and then I just say if not success, and note that I'm using safe parse. Make sure you use safe parse when you're doing this on your own, because parse will throw an error, and you don't actually want it to throw an error. You want to be in control of the response, and so you do safe parse, and then it just gives you this Boolean flag success true or false, and then you can return. I just return success false with the errors email. Please enter valid email address. And then once I know that the email is valid, I grab the user by email address. And this is a function that I created, which is just a wrapper around Payload local API. So you can see here I have this thing called a data access layer. So for now it's just users. And from here I have where's my, let's see, get user by email. So you can see here I'm passing in an object with email, user props, email, and then I grab the payload, get payload with the config, and here's my email result. I go and say I go and find that user where email equals email, and then here's where I create the user if it doesn't exist. So I say user equals, if the result total docs, this is a flag that comes back from the result that you can use. You don't actually have to check the length or anything like that of the docs. You don't have to check the length of the docs. You have this at your disposal if you need it. The number of docs will be right there, the count. And so if I say if it equals 0, then go ahead and create the user with that email address. So over here I just create the user, and here's where the default name is of guest. So I create that user if the user doesn't exist, else if it does exist I grab the first user. And real quick, this is basically the same as doing that like that, but I actually like this way of doing it because it's new to me. I haven't seen it. I started using this a couple weeks ago, and I actually like it because you can do things. You can do like the chaining where if something doesn't exist, you can do that. You can do the chaining, or what do they call that? Yeah. So we grab the user. I assume there is one user, which is why I'm having the exclamation mark, I think. Yeah, so you'll see like, yeah, user or undefined. So I'm just going to assume that there is a user here. And so that gets returned by get user by email. So heading back over to here in our actions, we have the user coming out of get user by email. So it's either going to return the user found or it's going to return the new user that was created as a result. Now I have this other function called send login link. And again, that's in my data access layer file. We instantiate payload. We generate a token, and the way I'm generating a token is through this function called random bytes, which is actually part of a native Node crypto library. So I use random bytes for that. You're welcome to, of course, use whatever logic you want to generate your token. This is not by no means a requirement. And so we have the where to go? We have the send login link. Here we go. So we have the token. I'm making it 32 characters, and you just format it to a hex string, and there's the token. And so now what I do is I update the user object where user ID equals that, and I say login token equals token, and then I set an expiration with 15 minutes into the future. You're of course welcome to manage that however you see fit. And this is a string. And then I create a URL where it goes to API/auth/login/token. And this is an endpoint, a custom endpoint that we're going to be going over here in a minute. So I have this URL, and then I have this send function, another function that I created to manage the nicely styled email that you saw. And so we're going to go over this in more detail, but it suffices to say that this component is what renders that email, the design of that and layout and styling of that email. I have a component, a React component that does that for me, and we're using a library called where is it? React Email. So if you want more information on that, go to React Email. I'll have a link in the description for that. But and again, I'll go over this in another video. But that's what I'm using, React Email. They have a whole bunch of components that allow you to generate email templates using React to do that. And the output of this render function is HTML. Again, I instantiate payload, and then payload has its own send email function, and then I just pass. You can send the email to the email that I'm requesting. Here's the subject line and the HTML, and you'll notice the way I organize this. I have a folder under source called emails. And that way, this will help me organize all the different types of emails that I'm going to want to be sending out. And so I call this login link email, of course, but it has everything in here that you're going to need to send an email. It has its own send function, which I export, but then it also has the component too. So, which is kind of nice having it all co-located together. And so you can see here's the actual email content, and so here's the component, and then export a send function, which then sends the email using payload send email. That you can put the subject line in there and then the HTML. And there's that. This is that send function, which comes from that login link email component. That gets sent out, and then now you saw the email, and that link gets generated here. And so now we're going to talk about custom endpoints. In my main payload config file, we have endpoints. So this property inside of the main, at the root of your config, we have a property called endpoints. And you can see I have a couple in here already. It's an array. We'll talk about GitHub in an upcoming video very shortly, I promise. It's pretty neat. But here we have this login token verify endpoint function here. So we'll click into that. And you can see I have the way I organized my payload stuff. Everything that I have that's configuration based, configuration related to payload, I put in a config folder. All the examples that I've seen so far put it all out in the root. I don't really like that because there's all kinds of stuff going on. You have your own lib folder, utils, all that kind of stuff. And so anything that's specifically a configuration for payload, I throw in the config folder, and that's everything: blocks, collections, endpoints, fields, globals, and everything. So here's my endpoints. We have an auth.ts, and you can see anything related to auth, any endpoint related to auth, I have a function in here for that. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not a function. It's an object. These are not functions. These are objects that are type hinted with this endpoint type, which you can get from payload. So the endpoint this endpoint type requires a path, a method, and a handler. So you can kind of think of this as like a route handler, which the request gets passed in, but the request is enhanced with their own type called payload request, because it also includes other things like user and also the payload API. So you don't have to instantiate that or anything like that with your config, or it's all part of the request. So in the request, we have our route params, which we know includes token here. And so we pull the token out of there, grab the token, and we say if not token, we do a redirect back over to login, because imagine users clicking on a link from that email. It's not like we want to respond with like an error message, like just directly. You don't want to throw an error simply like at that level. If they click a link and it's not working, we actually want to redirect them over to the login page with an error message, right? And so I have this, it redirects them over to the login page with this like query string param called token error. And from there, you can decide on how to display that error based off of this query string param. We know now that we know that it's the token is correct. Then we look up the user. We go and find that user based on that token. So login token equals token. Oh, and by the way, yeah, these I will go over. I added these to the collection. This login token plus login token expiration to the collection as fields, and I'll go over that as soon as I'm done here. So we check to see if that user exists with that token. If the user doesn't exist, again, this total docs convenience property is if it's 0, then again we redirect them to the login page, and I say token error equals true, and then we move on. At this point, we know there's a user now, and so I just grab the first user, And then also now I take the login token expiration field from the database and turn it into a date object, because it's a string in the database, but it is a date string. And then we just turn it into date object. And then we compare that with now. So whatever is now. And then, but before we do the comparison, what I want to do is I want to wipe out login token and login token expiration, just set those back to null. And then, so no matter what we do, because of the fact that we got to this point, we need to just reset the login token information on that user. Now that it's reset, now we can compare the expires. So if it's the expiration date is less than now, then we know that it's expired, and so we redirect them to the login page with token error equals true. And then lastly, we log the user in. And this is kind of the reason why I'm doing this video, is because we need to be able to log them in without a password. And Payload has a function within their local API called .login, but it has a required field, or two required fields, and that's email address and password. And we don't know the user's password because we didn't enter it. And so I had to kind of rebuild the login feature, the login function, so that we didn't require the password. And the way I did that, just at a high level, philosophically or whatever, I had to kind of reverse engineer the cookie. So when you log in the standard way with Payload, it generates a JWT and stores that in a HTTP only secure cookie. And so I looked at that cookie and I went into the source code of Payload in GitHub and kind of just stepped through line by line on how that cookie was created, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything. I wanted to make sure that that JWT was created exactly the same way, but also, as much as I can help it, it can't be created in a hard-coded way, because if they ever make any changes under the hood on how that JWT was generated, then I would have to try to keep up with those code changes. And so rather than me hard coding different things like, I don't know, expiration, the fields that are included in the JWT. So like in Payload, if you're not aware, as a developer of Payload, you have the ability to go into your user collection and dictate what's included in the JWT. So if you have any roles, if you want a role that's included in the JWT, you can set that in your config. You can say, hey, I want this role to be included in the JWT. And so that's the key reason why I didn't want to hard code things, because if I ever made changes to the config, I would also have to go through and make changes to my login to make sure that the JWT is updated correctly. So anyway, that's a long way of saying that. Let's take a look at the code. So login with just takes a user object, so whatever gets returned from Payload as your user, and we add one more property to the user object, and I'm just calling it user with collection users. That's part of part of what's getting added to the JWT is this collection. And so I'm building up this user object that Payload expects to use as part of its JWT generation, and collection is something that they want inside of the JWT. Here I'm just grabbing the config from the users collection, so you can actually drill down into Payload, go into collections, and I'm saying the users collection. I'm grabbing the config out of there. And again, this is one of those things that allows me to not have to hard code stuff. So if you've ever made any changes in your config to the users, then I don't have to worry about it. It's all going to be in here anyway. And so now there's an auth property within config, and and that you can say if auth is false or if there is no auth property, then I know that the collection that's being used here is not actually an authenticated collection. So users out of the box, of course, is set to be authenticated. Now I grab the secret, and here's the thing. Here's the fields to sign. So meaning, what fields do we want to include in the JWT? And I'm using this function that actually comes from Payload source code. So it's coming from Payload. And this is the function that I found that they were, when I was reverse engineering this, I went into their GitHub repo, and I went through line by line to figure out how they did that. And I found that they were using this function called get fields to sign. And ultimately, all this does is return an object that includes the fields, well, to sign. That's it. It's just going to be the email address. By default, it'll be the email address, the ID, and the collection name. And again, this is something I didn't want to hard code because something might change in the future, and I didn't want to have to worry about it. I don't want to have to update this code for any reason. It's probably not 100% foolproof, but at least I'm moving in the right direction on that point. And then now that we have the fields to sign, all we have to do is sign it as a JWT token. So here we pass it fields to sign, pass it the secret for signing it, and then the token expiration. Again, no hard coding. I just grab the token expiration from the config. That's something that you can change in your config, but there is a default value, and I don't even have to be aware of what that is because I'm not hard coding it. Real quick on this JWT sign, this is a function that I had to copy over from Payload. And the reason why is because if you go into their source code, they actually have this function, and they use this function to do this, to sign the JWT. However, it's not exported in such a way that I can import it from their library. I wish it was, otherwise I wouldn't have copied it over, because this is the one exception where I had to, in a sense, hard code some stuff. This function is like line by line, character by character, exactly what they have in their repo. I didn't make any changes. They use a library called Jose to do the signing, but you can see it's done in a way that's specific to however Payload wishes to sign that JWT, and so I wanted to make sure I was doing it exactly the same as they were doing it, because at some point, if I sign that JWT in any way that's like slightly different, it's possibly going to make it so that the authentication doesn't work. So I want to make sure that if you go to the admin panel and you're logged in, it fully recognizes you as a valid admin user, for instance. But sadly, this function I had to copy over and paste into my own code base. At some point, if it's exportable from their library, then I'll use that. But if you're aware of something else that they're exporting that does the same thing that I missed, please let me know. I'll update my code. So we signed the token, we grabbed the token, and here's the name that I'm going to be using for the cookie. And again, here's some code where I don't have to hard code the internals. So like I've seen examples of where people have written their own cookies and then just hard coded the name, but we don't want to do that because somebody they may change this. They may change the default cookie prefix. I don't know. And so I just want to make sure that I'm having to touch this code as little as possible whenever they make changes. And so I'm just kind of piggybacking on whatever they have going on as their default settings. And this is something you can change in your own config. And how bad would it be if you had to like update this code every single time you made changes elsewhere. So this is so that helps clean that up. Here's another function that I pulled down from Payload's library, and that just gives me the expiration date, a proper expiration date, and however they see fit. And then now, because now with Next.js, I have where is it? Log in with cookies. So I'm creating a cookie store, and then I just await cookies. And then with the cookie store, you can set the cookie. So here's the name, the value is the token, expires, HTTP only true, domain. Here's another one that is not hard-coded. It comes right from Payload's configuration options, their default configuration options. And then also secure coming from Payload configuration options. So, and then once the cookie is set, now we're back over to here where we say login with. The cookie is set at this point, and now all I do is I respond with a redirect to the /admin page. And that's it. And I showed you in the demo that's how it worked. And so now the last part I wanted to talk through is the easiest part, and that is the user collection set updates to have the login token and the login token expiration. So we have, I added a name field, but here's the login token and login token expiration. And I made these required as false, required false, made this as a date. I don't know how this could just be a text field, honestly, because based off of what I was doing when I was working on this, I noticed that the date actually has no, unless you have this in the UI. If you wanted this to be in the UI in the admin panel, then date makes a difference, because then it will just give you a date picker for that. But we don't want this. We don't want this, and we do not want this in the admin panel. We want those hidden. We want those as hidden fields. And one thing you should be aware of, you may be tempted to just say, "Oh, I can just do this as hidden true," which you could do, and that'll actually work. But the problem is, once you have it as hidden, it doesn't get returned from the API. So it'll be hidden, but won't be returned in the JSON of the API. And so we actually need it. So in other words, if I, let's see, get user. So if I returned this user, because if I set those fields as hidden, they actually those fields would not be set as properties in this user object. They would not be there. So I kind of learned that a little bit the hard way when I was like, why are they not here? So I dug into it a little bit. And so what you need to do, instead of having hidden, you need to have this little disabled equals true in the admin panel, or in this admin property of your field. Just make it disabled equals true, and they will not show up in the UI, but they will be available in the API JSON response. And that's really all you need to do. That's it. So I hope that was educational, and let me know if there's more to this that you think I need to go over. I'll follow up in the next video with setting up ShadCN and Tailwind 4 if you want. Let me know if you think that would be valuable to go over. Other than that, as far as user authentication, the next time we see anything specifically related to that will be the GitHub OAuth login, and we're going to be using this this login with function to help us with that now that we don't need a password to log in. You can use this anywhere in your app. If you have a user object and you want to log them in for whatever reason, you can just pass that user object into that function and boom, they're logged in. We may use that in the future too as a login as function, so that as an admin user, wouldn't it be cool if you can log in as another user to test the experience on the website as it acting as. So yeah, we could have like a function called acting as or login as, and it'll log you in as them, but then it'll let you back out and log you back in as your proper user. But anyway, we won't get too much into that. But this will lend itself to all kinds of features like that in the future, and so all of this stuff is in GitHub on my repo on the Learn Payload organization. I'll have that linked in the description. But other than that, I really appreciate your time and patience that took me a little bit longer to put this video out. And honestly, I did this video like 3 times this weekend and wasn't happy with the result. And so I wanted to kind of help. I wanted to try to keep it as concise as I could while also being detailed. And so if I wasn't detailed enough, I apologize. I will follow up with another video and dig into more detail on any particular topic here. But again, thank you for your time. We'll see you in the next one.